So when I saw that they were calling today, I knew that it was not going to be good news, because if it's good news, it usually takes them a week to call, and if it's bad news, it's within 24 hours. I just realized that I still have the stickers on me from this morning from the Children's Hospital, but it fits, so I'm gonna just keep going. Today, Tessie had an appointment that I haven't really talked about here. I don't think I've mentioned it here at all, at a children's hospital that Tessie hasn't actually had appointments at before. Sadie has. So after Tessie's genetic testing last year, I got a phone call basically while I was driving down the highway, and I pulled over into a park and ride, and those results were very, very quickly explained to me. It was explained that they were really, by the doctor. He explained that it was going to sound really, really scary, and he explained that someday he would bring me in and explain them to me when the other kids got tested. Well, our insurance denied testing the other kids, and after that it just kind of felt like everybody at that hospital lost interest in doing anything else. Basically, they'd said a bunch of really scary things, but no one even wanted us to come into the office and explain to us what those results meant more than they already had. And I had done my own reading as much as I could, but it's a super rare gene, and so there wasn't that much that I could learn, and I was upset. I mentioned it to Tessie's neurologist at the last appointment. I think I actually started crying, and he called the geneticist, and the geneticist just shot me an email basically justifying that he never brought us in and that maybe someday they'd be able to find out more, but they couldn't now. It was frustrating, mostly because I just wanted to be brought into the appointment to like a appointment afterwards, which I know you're supposed to have after you get test results, and have them explain to me. More than a 5-minute phone call at the side of the highway where you're telling me that my daughter might have bone tumors and might have a potentially fatal mutation. And you're saying it sounds really scary, but it might not be. We don't really know. So I was really frustrated. I made a video and we got our results last year. And then we just kind of were up in limbo. Like, it felt like a lot of people were promising us a lot of things because they were fascinated by her results. And then nothing happened. And we were just waiting and waiting and waiting for someone to do something. And at first everyone was really confident that they'd never had a problem getting siblings tested before. And then our insurance said absolutely not, they weren't going to do it. And that was that. It would have been thousands and thousands of dollars that we didn't have to test the other kids. So from this is super important, your other children need to be tested, to just, well, I asked our doctor if he thought a second opinion at the other children's hospital was a possibility. He thought that that was a good idea if that was what I wanted. So he put in a referral to the other hospital, and I got this phone call. And they said, the first phone call said, is this a second opinion or are you transferring care? And I said, you know what? I don't really know at this point. I'm looking to transfer care, but at this point I guess it's a second opinion. That's kind of why I want to come in and talk to a doctor. And they said, okay. And in this first phone call, the first phone call we got, they said, all right, just so you know, if we're going to request her full exome testing results from the other hospital, and if the results aren't serious, then it'll be a 6-month wait currently. If it is something more serious, it will be around a 4-month wait. So we'll see what triage says. And I said, okay. I was expecting to hear from them in a while, and I got another call the next week, and the person who called asked the same question. Is this for a second opinion or are you transferring care? And I said, in my head, I thought, you've already asked me that question, but out loud I said, I'm not totally sure at this point. And they said, because if you're willing to transfer care and make her a patient here, we will see her in 2 months. And I said, you know what, I'm not happy with the care that she's been receiving, so I will transfer care. So we did that. And her doctor thought it was really strange that they made me say that I was transferring care, because he said you could just transfer care again. It's not like she's stuck there. That was odd. But I was fine with it. That wasn't a big deal. But I did spend the next 2 months up until today kind of stressing about what that meant because of that first phone call where they said, like, if it wasn't serious, it would be 6 months, and if it was, it would be 4 months. And then I get this phone call and they're like, hey, we'll take her in 2 months after they looked at her full exome test results. And I said that to her doctor, and he said that probably just means that they're really curious about what her test results mean. And every other doctor that she saw that we chatted about basically said the same thing. They're probably really curious about those test results. That just means that she's interesting. So we went in today, and I figured that it meant she was interesting, but I think that the way she was the gene that was interesting about her may not have been the one that I was thinking, because I thought that it was her the possible breathing, possible whatever, no one knows what's going on with it gene was going to be the interesting gene. Because Tessie has 2 genetic mutations. She has a gene called MYO1H that has a mutation on it, and that mutation is from both Paul and I. So it's an autosomal recessive mutation, which means that I'm a carrier of the gene and Paul is a carrier of the gene. And so she had to get the mutation from both of us to be affected, but we don't know. She's like, she is one of the only known people in the world that has this gene. I think she might be the only known person in the world that has the 2 variations that she has. So no one really knows if it's damaging, if it's not damaging. There's algorithms that say it's probably damaging. The kids that have other variations have had breathing problems, but because it's only one family, they don't know if that's why they have breathing problems, because it's just not enough evidence to say why. It is suspicious, they said today, that she also has breathing problems, but she doesn't have the same breathing disorder that they have. Even though that was the breathing disorder she was suspected of having when she was a baby, she doesn't have signs of it anymore. As a baby, they suspected that she had congenital central hypoventilation because she had 136 hypopneas, which basically means she was breathing so shallowly that her CO2 levels were so high that her life was in danger. So her first reports indicated that and if she'd had that, she would have had to be on a ventilator. But that got better and better. And if she had that disease, that wouldn't have gotten better and better. So her pulmonologist is pretty confident that she doesn't have that now, because she still has central apneas, but she doesn't have hypopneas. And so, which means she stops breathing, but she doesn't have shallow breathing. And that shallow breathing for everybody was way more scary than the not breathing at all, because people don't usually die from central apnea. In fact, I've been told people don't die from central apnea. It can be damaging to things like your heart, but you start breathing again. Whereas congenital central hypoventilation, you eventually have an attack where you don't start breathing again. So that is what you don't want to have. And that is a very, very rare disease. So not having that is an amazing, good thing. Basically, on that one, they still don't know. She explained a bunch of things to me and just really, really went over it. They've also done a bunch of tests in Brazil, and they found people that are carriers like me and Paul, but they haven't found people like Tessie that have both genes. And that those doctors believe that it has to do with the formation of the jaw. They don't believe it's a breathing thing. So no one really knows. They want us to bring her back in a few years, and they're hoping that maybe in a few years they'll know what that gene actually is, and they'll have more answers for us. So that is the first half of it. The second half was that Tessie and I also have another gene mutation called EXT2. And this one is a dominant gene. I have the mutation and I passed it on to Tessie. And EXT2 mutations, this one is known as pathogenic, which means that it is known as causing disease. It's known as being harmful. And I guess apparently from what they explained today, 96% of the people that have a pathogenic EXT2 mutation supposedly have tumors on their bones, bone tumors. And so she asked the question of me, which everyone asked, and usually by the age of 12, they have apparent bone tumors. And so she asked me if I do. Generally they start on like the femur. And I said no. When they asked me that before, I was like, do I have bumps on my bones? No. Not that I can feel. I don't think that I do. As far as I know, I don't feel any bumps on any of my bones. She said, okay, so here's the reason why. There are 4 other people in the world who've been identified with this specific variation of this gene, and none of them have bone tumors either. And so even though this gene has been identified as pathogenic and causing bone tumors, we think that it might not cause them. So they were wondering if we would be willing to go downstairs and get full body x-rays for Tessie, because if she is going to have bone tumors from this gene, they should already have begun forming at this point in time. So I was willing to do that because I want to know if she's going to have these bone tumors. Well, they're called osteochondromas, and they're not cancerous. But they also didn't sound like something you really wanted to have either. A big hollow bone tumor on the end of your femur can be problematic. Especially when you're like 12, which is usually around the time that they really, really get big and show up. I would rather know now if she's going to have them, although maybe it sounds like we've both escaped this, which would be really, really cool and a good thing. Good news. We've needed good news. So, because I've been wondering about that ever since I heard, bone tumors. I would have been way more freaked out though if I'd known that 96% figure. So, they said the fact that I didn't have them was a good thing, and the fact that those other 4 people that have the same variation don't have them is also a very good thing for us. She got the x-rays done. It was really hard to get x-rays of every part of Tessie's body, because they needed x-rays of her hands, of her feet, her legs, arms, lots and lots of x-rays of her torso, of her turned, of her flat, of her neck, and of her neck with her chin pointed up, of her sitting up, laying down, of her head. A lot of x-rays. And so that is over now. And they gave her a stuffed kitty, and she threw it on the ground. And then she ran across the room and she tried to steal a lead vest because it was very, very colorful and she wanted to take it with her. That was our morning. Sadie came along with us, you may have noticed. And the reason Sadie came along with us is because she woke up this morning with a really, really awful asthma attack. And she couldn't breathe, and I was just hooking up her nebulizer for her morning treatment when it happened, and so I put that on her, and she went through the whole nebulizer treatment with albuterol, and she still couldn't breathe when it was over, or breathe well. She was still visibly wheezing when the nebulizer treatment was over, and so I had her use her Ventolin, and she was a little bit better. Like, she could breathe, but I could still hear her breathing. I could still hear that there was something wrong. And so I wasn't going to send her to school like that. I knew that we were going to one of the best children's hospitals in the country. And so I took her with us just in case she was going to be having another asthma attack. Because I figured at that point there was a good chance we needed to take her to the ER, since it didn't seem like either the nebulizer or the rescue inhaler had resolved it very much. But after an hour in the car, when we got there, just as we got there, her breathing finally actually started to sound good. And after 2 hours in genetics, her breathing was finally the best it had been in a while. So we came home instead. We did another nebulizer treatment. And she is working on doing Duolingo, Swedish on the couch, and hanging out with Tessie. Hopefully she kicks this soon. I did feel a lot better after spending a lot of time talking to the genetic counselor. Oh, but there's more. There were some other test results that came in. While we were in the doctor's appointment, my phone rang, and I ignored it because I wasn't going to pick up my phone while I was in the doctor's office. When the genetic counselor went out to talk to the doctor with everything we told her, I looked at my messages and I saw that it was from the other children's hospital, and I knew that they had done like an at-home sort of sleep study where they put an oximeter on her that's not her regular breathing machine oximeter, that has never properly recorded or sent data. When I saw that they called, that whole machine was sent back yesterday afternoon. So when I saw that they were calling today, I knew that it was not going to be good news, because if it's good news, it usually takes them a week to call, and if it's bad news, it's within 24 hours. So she'd just gone out of the room. I got on my phone and I called the number back and went straight through to the person I needed to talk to, which I figured was also not a good sign. Instead of getting the phone tree like usual, she told me that they really needed to talk to me because during the sleep study, or during the, not sleep study, whatever it's called, during the oximeter study at home, Tessie's average oxygen level was 91, that she spent 5% of the night at 87, and I asked what her low was. I'd actually meant when I asked what her low was, what it was during the, she had mentioned the 87 part, but she didn't give me the number. So I think they'd said below 90%, 5% of the night was below 90%, and so I asked what that number was, and then she told me that that 5% of the night was at 87. She said, oh, but the low that you asked about was, and then she was quiet, and she said, I don't know that this can be right. The lowest reading on the oximeter that night was 49% that they got back. So that's scary. So they are increasing the level of oxygen that she is on at night, but the whole problem with the oxygen is that she just tears it off. So that is really the oxygen problem, is that we can't keep a nasal cannula on it because she tears her nasal cannula off even in her sleep. So I'm going to be working hard to see if there's any way we can keep it on her. I'm talking to her therapist and everybody else to see if anyone can come up with ideas to make her not hate that thing so much. Because yeah, 49% is not good, and that I think also probably explains why she is so tired at night, and she has been having a lot of apneas lately. That is it for today. Otherwise, she is doing really, really well. She's been randomly starting to sign to me, so I'm not sure if they're teaching her signs at school. No one's really mentioned teaching her signs, but she definitely signed thirsty to me, so I'm just going with that and teaching her more thirsty signs, because I mean, I think it's great that she's doing PECs, but I also think that it's great if she has some signs that she can use too. I'm just going with whatever ways she wants to use to communicate, and we can use a whole big combination if that's what she wants to do. Anyways, that is it for today. If you like this video, I would love it if you'd give us a thumbs up. If you're interested in all things autism, we would love it if you'd hit subscribe. And I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.